Hello and welcome to Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. My name is Karen Seltz and I am here with a very special guest. I'm so excited about this. Cat Cantrill. She is a dynamic and passionate matchmaker, dating coach, dating stylist. She is known for her heart-centered approach. She primarily caters to singles seeking meaningful connections and self-improvement. And she has dedicated herself to helping them navigate the complexities of modern love. She has been featured on CBS, Fortune, and datingadvice.com. She is the founder and CEO of the Heart Agency. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so excited to have you here, especially since you and I already got to visit once this week and I had you on the podcast. So now I get to see you again. So I'm so excited.
I know. So we met through a Facebook group, really,
Yeah,
and we hit it off immediately.
we
She
did.
invited me on her show, her podcast, Matchmaker. Wait, yeah?
You're a matchmaker. Yep.
Dear Matchmaker. I almost had
Yep.
it. Dear Matchmaker. And we had so much fun. And I'm so excited to have her here because she was mostly picking my brain.
Mhm.
And she doesn't know this yet, but I've been single for a very long time. So I am super excited to dig into your mind, Kat, and to
Mm,
see what what I can do to improve things. So
yeah.
tell us a little bit of background about you, like how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things in which it found me. If you would have asked me, 5 years ago, if this is something that I would be doing, I would have called you crazy, of course. And I think it's interesting where we always just kind of want to pay attention to kind of how life has a tendency to kind of shift and we kind of want to go along with the wave. And so my entrepreneurial journey started back in 2012, where I was a single mom, trying to get my feet underneath me. I had gone through a pretty tragic, dramatic divorce, and with somebody who I had met when I was like my first serious boyfriend, and we'd been together since I was 19, and I found myself in my early 30s just trying to navigate the dating world. And part of that journey of dating and online dating and meeting in real life and being stood up and traveling 2 hours for a date and all the things in between, I decided that I needed to pour back into myself. And part of that journey of pouring back into myself was starting my own business. And the business that I started it was a women's only dance studio. And because I was a dancer for a good majority of my life. So I opened up this dance studio, and organically, just naturally through the dance studio, I started coaching women on finding themselves and loving themselves and building their confidence and finding the spark, and from dating to relationships and just kind of everything in between, because the studio was kind of this magical place in which women were finding themselves again through dance. And then they had this newfound confidence and they started looking at their lives differently, in which came to me for advice. And so that led me on a journey of kind of really helping and coaching. And in my own personal journey, I had met my now husband online. Because when I started my business, I was a single mom. I was corporate by day, running my studio at night, coaching women, and raising my two teenagers. And then I decided that I had built this life for myself, that I was extremely proud of my life. And I knew that the right man would appreciate that. And when I met my husband, we met online, and then the women of the studio started gravitating and saying, wait a minute, how do I get one of these? How do I get my husband's name is Brian? How do I get a Brian into my life? So I would help women with dating, not thinking that that would end up pivoting and being the thing that I would end up helping uh, as really my sole purpose. So COVID kind of changed everything for me. Of course, when you own a physical dance space, COVID obviously had its effects, and it forced it to close. But out of that, the birth of like really like helping more and more single women were coming to me for help, for coming to me for coaching. So that held me like pivot really into dating coaching full time, in which that led to matchmaking because when you're a dating coach, people are like, "Oh, do you match? Are you a matchmaker?" And I kept going, "No, I don't do that. No, I don't do that," until the point where you just go to yourself, should I be doing that? Wait, there's so many people that are asking me about that. Like, is that something that I should be doing? And so just by listening to a need and just leaning into it, I just naturally just started matchmaking as a part of my business. And I have not, I mean, it has been that way ever since. So I would not be anywhere else.
Oh my gosh, there's so much in there. I love it. And what one thing I gathered is you were really following your bliss and it kept leading
Yes,
you
that's a
to
great way of putting
new
it.
new adventures. And I think so many people, women, especially when they're starting businesses, they're like, but what if this isn't the thing? And it's like,
Right,
well, you get to take some action and then the thing will present itself and then the next thing. So I love
right.
how you demonstrate that. And that's perfect because of what you're doing. You're showing people by example in so
Yes.
many areas.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I used to talk about a lot, is like the by leading by example, by giving women permission to do the thing, whatever that thing was for them, because every woman it was, and to me it was instead of saying why, say why not. And one of the things I used to tell women all the time was, what do you have to lose? I mean, at least you could try it. And then if you fail, okay, you fail, but at least you did the thing, whatever that thing may be. And so I've never been afraid of taking risks. I've being a risk taker is it's never bothered me. So I'm always happy to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, grow from those mistakes, admit to my own, admit when I fail and just keep taking those opportunities as learned opportunities in order to be a better version of myself.
I love that. I want to talk about the not being afraid to fail thing because I
Yeah.
think so many of us are raised to not fail. Like it's not
Right.
okay to fail. And I'm so curious, like how you cultivated that or if it was always that way.
I think that for me, it was I think if you're tuned in to who you are as a person and you know that this thing that you're doing is not a representation of who you are, like there's not you don't attach your identity to it. You
Mm.
take it as an opportunity of growth and it's like when I talk about dating, it's like don't be attached to the outcome. So cuz dating is a risk. Falling in love is a risk. Going on a date is a risk. It's all risky, right? So and that's I think how I've always viewed it is like to me I knew that there was going to be an opportunity and that it wasn't be it's not failure is not a reflection upon me as a person or something that jeopardizes my identity. It's it's an opportunity to learn and I think that's how I've just kind of I've always viewed it.
Oh, that's amazing. So what I'm hearing is like developing a neutral relationship with your results and then separating your identity,
Yes,
knowing that this thing isn't me. Those are just results. I took some
that's right.
actions. They either got some kind of outcome that I wanted or one that I didn't, or maybe somewhere in between. And the way I look at that is like it gives me information, right? What do I do next? Okay, well, let's do more of this thing because that worked and less of this thing because it didn't really work.
Right, exactly. And I think with dating you can't you have to the way that you should approach it is not going in with this mindset of this better with this person better be the one or I have all these signs and I feel like this person's it or whatever you build up this anticipation and these expectations about something versus like I'm going to go into this, I'm going to meet somebody new no matter what the outcome is. There are two things that are guaranteed. Number one, you're going to learn something about yourself, and number two, you're going to learn something, you're going to meet somebody new. That's it. Not be attached to the outcome. Just go in with an open mind and an open heart. Enough, of course. You don't want to throw everything at it, but just go in and just be like, okay, I'm going to meet somebody new. Fantastic. I'm going to learn something more about myself. I'm going to learn more about maybe what I want, what I don't want, etc. So, yeah, it's always an opportunity.
I love that. And it takes so much pressure off for this to
Yes.
be anything or for you to show up a certain way. It's just relaxing. So we kind of hyped up this show as like some of the mistakes that people make in dating.
Yeah.
Can you tell us like what you've seen people do and what they should do instead, or because I'm in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think just to set the tone, like, I wish that dating was black and white. Like, I wish that I can just show up and go, these are the things that you must do, or these are the things that you should not do. But there's always gray areas in dating because everybody has their own journey. Everybody has been through their own previous relationships that has, become the threading of their existence that they carry into every interaction, as you know, into every like date. And so I think I just want to say that because I notice a pattern of things that do work and a pattern of things that do not work. And I think that there are always exceptions. There are always exceptions. So I think the first dating mistake that people make is putting on unrealistic expectations on a complete stranger. So when usually you're going on that first date, it's what I would consider a date zero. So this is somebody that you usually meet online or somebody that you're being introduced to with friends. You don't know, pretty much nothing about this person other than their photos, a couple of prompts, or maybe some bio that you received from your friend. And that's pretty much it, unless you've stalked them online. But even then, which I see you, I know you people. Um, Even then, you don't know enough, and this person is still a stranger. So to put expectations upon a person in which you know nothing about, I think is setting you up for failure because that is something in which when you are putting expectations on somebody, and most likely they're going to disappoint you 100% because the idea of the person of who they are and who you've created in your head most likely is not going to be who they are. They're going to be a different representation. So I think just going into it with no expectations other than I'm going to go in, I'm going to meet somebody new. Um, the second mistake, and this is controversial. So the second mistake though, that I see is people taking up too much. There's too much time between the initial contact and setting up the date. So this is when people get into the pattern of becoming pen pals, in which you connect on the app, you start texting back and forth. Next thing you know, you've been texting for 2 weeks. Nobody has yet to set up a date because she's like, well, I'm not going to ask him out because the man should be asking the woman out. The woman's like, or the man's like, well, I don't know, like, how she's feeling or what's going on. And there's a lot of miscommunication. So for my ladies, what I would love for women to do, honestly, is not to sit and wait for him to ask her out. The intent is there, which is usually there's a connection that's happened, there's a match that's happened, or there's intent that's behind that. And as you're chatting, to only chat for 24 to 48 hours tops. That's it. Because there's momentum, there's energy in that exchange, right? Because once you connect with somebody, you kind of get a little excited and you're just like, oh, this is fantastic. Oh, I am getting to know this person. Keep that momentum going by setting up the date within the 24, 48 hours, within the week would be great. Now, I know sometimes schedules don't allow that, but I find that in that time period, while you have their attention, setting up the date sooner and later so that you don't have these unrealistic expectations or you haven't built it up into this grandiose idea of who this person is, that you set up the date sooner than later so that you can see them in the flesh, because they may look great on paper and they may have what they call great digital body language, which is this texting. But then you meet them in real life and you're just like, oh, wait. No, no, no. I don't think, it can't, sometimes it doesn't match. And so what you want to do is decrease the amount of time of chitter chatter and meet them together, meet them as soon as possible in real life.
Yeah, so it's like reducing the investment of time you have too,
Exactly. That's exactly right.
which definitely I can see how that could lead to increased expectations, which
Yes.
we know where that goes. So as a woman, how do you recommend like getting that date?
Yeah. So if you've been talking to him for a little while and he has not asked you out yet, because I think one of the things that I want to touch on is that the fear of rejection is real from both parties, both men and women. The fear of rejection is real. It's even more evident now than ever because of social media, because of all of this pressure that we have on having the perfect relationship and et cetera, et cetera. Nobody wants to be rejected. Nobody. And that includes men. They don't want to be rejected either. So sometimes men don't know, like, is she really interested? Is she not interested? It's okay to do a nudge. So the nudge would be, what would be great is to have this conversation face to face. What would
Mhm.
be wonderful if I heard your voice as you're telling me the story. You know what? This is one of my favorite places in town. Have you ever been there? You don't have to actually ask him out if like you're one of those women that is insisting on him asking you out, which I would encourage you to change your mind about that. But if you are chatting with them, you can very easily nudge them. And if they don't take the hint, then that's up to you. Either you can just consider it, okay, it's not going to go anywhere, or you can just ask them out. It's okay to just ask them out.
Recently I was chatting with somebody that I had an interest in. I'm like, so are you ever going to ask me out? And then he did.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was great. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great tips. One of the things that this kind of got in my head, I've always been very strong. I've had strong energy. I always go for what I want. And then I heard about like masculine and feminine energy and about like being in my feminine and allowing them to come to me and to ask me out and to lead. And I would love to hear your take on that because you're a strong woman.
Yeah. So I don't get behind the masculine and feminine energy because it's confusing, quite honestly. And if women are going to sit back and wait for the man to lead, it's again, things have changed so much as far as roles, and thank goodness, right? Like things things are changing. The way we connect is changing. The way that people are, women, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we weren't allowed to vote, right? So thank goodness that things are continuously evolving. Wonderful. I think that I am not the reason why I don't get behind the masculine and the feminine is because it's very confusing, and it's all about there's miscommunication in all of that. So men are thinking she wants to lead, she wants to take the initiative, she wants to, because there's so much confusing messaging out there. So if a woman is sitting there waiting for the man to lead and the man's thinking, well, she's a woman, it's the 21st century, of course, so they're both just sitting in the wings waiting and not wondering what's going on. And I think too, and I'm going to just say this very gingerly because I don't, I'm not an expert and I don't want to dive into it, but there's also like borderline of somebody who's leading that there could be some controlling behaviors. There could be other behaviors in there in which are not characteristics of what you're looking for in a partner. And so to me, it's about just interest, right? So there are interesting, two parties that are interested in one another. And it doesn't matter who asks out who, because if we want to talk about masculine and feminine, there are men that have more feminine and women that have more masculine, right? It's all about, do we fit together? Because for some, if you are super feminine or whatever, and you want a super masculine man, that's fine. If you are, it just, for me, are we two puzzle pieces that come together? Can we openly communicate? Can we have the capability of being open and honest and set up a steady, a solid foundation with one another in order to have a flourishing and growing relationship. And one of the things that I love to talk about is the Gottmans. And the Gottmans the Gottman Institute, they're a couple who have researched relationships for 40 years. And so much so that the Gottmans can watch a couple interact with each other and can determine within listening to them for 5 minutes, can determine at a 97% accuracy rate whether or not they could get it, whether or not they're going to get a divorce. Just how people communicate with one another. And there's nothing in the Gottman research that says in order to have a successful long-term relationship, one of you has to be in the masculine and one that has to be in the feminine. It's two people. Do they have the ability to show each other mutual appreciation? Do you appreciate this potential this person for what they have to offer? And will they appreciate you for what you have to offer? The masculine and feminine does not matter.
Oh my gosh, that opened up so much for me because it's hilarious. So I said like I'm strong, right? And
Yeah.
I prefer men that are quieter, that are more analytical and so like and and then I'm
Yes.
waiting for these guys that are shy to ask me out and it doesn't happen. So I'm going out with guys that don't match with me.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Well, yeah. And I think, it's okay. Like, and I think again, my heart goes out to women too, because they're confused too, right? So strong, independent, self-sufficient women are like, oh, no, wait a minute. I have to now release and do this in order to find love. And you don't have to change yourself. It's just finding that other puzzle piece,
Yeah.
whatever that puzzle piece is for you. And just so you know, Karen, statistically speaking, women who ask out men have greater chances of having that relationship work. Just so you know.
Well, this is good to know. Good thing I had you on. I've been doing it wrong ever since I read this and believed this that I get to be more feminine and more, receiving.
Which you will be. There's ebbs and flows to all of that, right? And I think Brene Brown talked about this in one of her talks that talks about, her and her husband and how they're both not 100% all the time, right? So one day she will be at a 30% and he will be at a 70%. So when he's a 70 and she's a 30, he's doing the lifting, the leading, the lifting. I mean, this is a partnership, the lifting, whatever it is that's going on. There are some days where she's 70% and he's 30%, and that 70%, she's doing the leading. There's no like, I'm in my or I'm in my feminine and I'm not. Partners don't talk that way.
Right.
It's all about appreciating each other, lifting each other up, being there to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations, but hold space to have those uncomfortable conversations in a non-judgmental, loving, compassionate, empathetic way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, if I think about my relationships that were long lasting, they were mostly balanced, like you're
Yes,
saying, like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh
So
my
people are so confused. So they're like,
God.
and even for myself, I remember when I was single and I was dating, I would go on dates with these men and they would be like, "Oh my gosh, you are so much." And I'm like, "Well, yes. I'm too much. I was too independent. I was married to my job. I was all of these things." And I remember having that conversation with myself where I'm like, should I change? Like, is this what I have to do in order to find love? And then I met my husband, and my husband was like, oh, this, more of this, please. Like, he didn't want me to dim my light. He didn't want me to change. He didn't want me to be something I'm not. He was my puzzle piece. He was the man who like looked at me and could see me, like
Hmm.
could see me for who I was and was like, this, I want more of this. And he is my biggest cheerleader. And anytime that he ever sees me dimming my light, he's always like, are you okay? What's going on? Can we talk about it? Do you want to talk about it? Like he's not saying to me, are you in your feminine? And I'm like, are you in your masculine? That's just not a thing.
Well, maybe you could start because that's pretty funny. I think he would laugh really hard if you said that to
He
him.
would, I know. Yeah, he'd be like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
You're not
Exactly.
allowed to hang out with that Karen girl anymore. What you're doing to your mind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, you know how it is. Like
Oh.
we read a magazine article or we follow
Oh no, it's
somebody who's
all over and it's all over TikTok. It's all over. It's
yeah.
all over.
Or
Yes.
we follow somebody who's not living from or not speaking from lived experience. They're speaking theoretically.
Right.
And I had a friend who was a dating and love coach who I knew her for 6 years. She went on many dates every single week. And, toward the end of our friendship, she finally had a relationship for like 2 months and was suddenly the expert. But she was a dating and love coach that whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like,
I think for the women, and this is just, and maybe this is, I just want to touch on this one point because I think it's important to mention. So when you are a strong woman like ourselves, you do need to know though when to let your guard down. Like that's the hardest thing for strong and women is because we've had to do so much for ourselves and we've got children and some of us, not all of us, but so when we meet somebody, it's up to us to be able to let that person in. And sometimes that's a power struggle because it is so scary and it can be it's a risk, right? It's a risk to let someone in. And I think that even though you are a strong, independent woman, it's okay that you can open up and rely and depend on somebody. So,
mm, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I talk to a lot of people about being willing to receive.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
that's a big one. So what other like tips do you have or what other mistakes do you see people make?
Yeah. So another mistake that I see people do quite a bit is 4-hour dates. So now, not to like, I think again, there are exceptions to this rule, but I have a 2-hour rule. And again, it's a guideline. I shouldn't say a rule. It's a guideline because every time I say rule, then people are like, well, rules are meant to be broken. So guideline, because when you have when so there I don't know if I mean, I'm sure about attachment theory, right? So we've got different attachment styles that are based off of previous relationships and are based off of how we were raised and how we were loved as kids. And we carry these attachment styles into our dating lives. And people that are more anxiously attached are usually the ones that it's very easy for them to be intimate with somebody on emotional level very, very quickly. Like very easy for them to open. I'm an open book. Tell me everything. I'll tell you everything. And these people are usually the first date, and when they're on the first date, they're usually the ones that overshare. They're the ones that like throw everything at you. And one of the things, and these are the ones that have a 4-hour date. So one of the things I say is to keep it as a 2-hour maximum, right? So we want to also leave a little not to I'm not about gameplay. Don't get me wrong. I'm not about gameplay. However, you do want to leave the date on a high note and leave them wanting to see you more. Like, I'm sure that some people, and I've heard this over and over again, where people have gone on dates and they're like, well, I feel like I just figured out, I just know everything about the person already. There's no like curiosity. And
Mm,
so I want to, I coach people that I want you to leave it at around the 2-hour mark because usually about the 2-hour mark, there's one of two things that happen. Either you're going to go on and you're going to have that third drink and nothing positive happens from a third drink, or at that point you're going to start to go into much deeper topics that just leave for another time. So my anxious my anxious daters, it's a good boundary for them to have where they're like, okay, I know I'm only going to be here and I can only be here for 2 hours. But also I want people to understand that when you're on that first date, that the mindset that I want you to have is that this person's a stranger and they need to earn the right to know some of the deeper parts of yourself.
mm.
save those, allow the other person to show up as if they earn it from you, right? Allow the other person to consistently show up and then slowly allow that person in and share these more intimate parts about yourself. Because sometimes when we share too much too soon and it can overwhelm people and they lose interest. And so just know that, okay, I know that there are these things that have happened to me in my life and I would love to share them with this person, but I'm going to let this person show up for me so that I can slowly release this information to them as I slowly build trust with them.
Mm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you're talking
Um,
like first date, second date, all dates.
I'm talking, I
Wow.
think the oversharing, usually that one really pertains to the first date. I think that again, just kind of keeping that in mind of just like, okay, I'm not just going to slowly let this person in versus I'm just going to go on a date. Cause people sometimes on that first date will be like, let's just cut to the chase. And I'm like, no, no, that's not how connection builds. Connection cannot build of like, let's get to the heavy stuff. We don't know each other, so we can sit here and judge one another. No, because one of the things that I've discovered is that there's really like people have deal breakers, but what I've discovered, there's really no deal breakers. That if there's a connection that grows and people are willing to make compromises on things. So like if they feel as a strong enough of a connection and what used to be a deal breaker for them is no longer a deal breaker because that person's worth it. So I think that when you are super serious with them on the first date or you overshare, it's just going to burn it up and it's going to not go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. I love that so much. I
Um,
can't imagine going out of, oh, here's this, I'm going to tell you a funny story.
tell me,
I was,
tell me.
I was talking to this guy online. He was really good looking and we had never spoken on the phone and we met for a date and he was a pilot and he's like, oh, maybe I'll take you flying. He was really good looking, really tall, so boring. I almost died. And I was like, thank God I wasn't stuck in an airplane with this guy for 4 hours.
Oh my
Like,
gosh. Yeah.
I mean, it was such a shame. The moment he
Yeah.
opened his mouth, I'm like, oh gosh.
This is why you should meet them sooner than later.
No. Yes. Yeah, I
That you
met him
didn't do.
soon, but I hadn't spoken to him on the phone, which I like to do. What do you think about that?
I think it depends.
Yeah.
So there has been some recent research. If you're, this is good. This is particularly like for online dating. Um, there's been some research that has come out that says that if you exchange your phone numbers off the app before meeting in real life, that your chances of meeting them, of actually setting up the date, decrease by 40% by exchanging your phone number. So if you must get them on the phone, I think that if there's something inside of you that goes, maybe I should get them on the phone, then do it.
Yeah.
But it's not a must. And plus, I think that, women are like, well, I love to get their phone number and I love to do these background checks, which is fine. But a lot of people now are using Google Voice.
Mm.
So even if you do a search on a Google Voice number, you're still not going to find, you're not going to find enough. And I think that if you're worried about that, that you can very easily ask them for their last name. And if they're not willing to give their last name, then, you can judge it or process that however you want to process it. But I mean, I think it just depends. Again, it's a case by case basis. They say that research says that if you exchange phone numbers and you haven't set up a date, you're 40% likely to actually set up the date because then it becomes a texting relationship. So if you connect through the app, sometimes you can do voice. You can do voice through the app too. So you can leave a voice message, or sometimes there's voice prompts. I think on Hinge, they can do a
Yeah.
voice prompt so you can listen to their voice because some people are like, well, I need to listen to their voice. So I think again, it's a case by case, but I advise people not to exchange numbers and just do it all through the app.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
thing is like my time is valuable and I'm not dating a bunch of people at once.
Right.
So if I'm going to actually invest the time to go out with someone, I don't know, I just want to hear their voice and make
Yeah.
sure there's like a wavelength thing for me. Like I can
Yeah.
tell on the phone if we at least have something in common and there's like a common wavelength and then a desire to meet them. Because most of them, once I hear them on the phone, I'm like, oh, hell no. Nope. Like there's just, I don't know, I just know.
Yeah. I
Or
think
I think I know.
Because I mean, it's the first time you're actually connecting and there's nerves. And I
Mm,
don't, even on the very first, like when you meet each other in real life, you're still not really truly yourselves, right? So when you get them on the phone, they're nervous, there's expectations that are there. And I think that too, that how people present themselves, even on the phone, is not, could not, could possibly not be a representation of who they are in real life.
mm,
So I always have, so one of the dating mistakes that people make is they date for chemistry, not compatibility.
mm,
So women in particular are like, yeah, I just didn't have that spark. And I have this formula. It's called the 2-3-5 formula. And so this exists for the first 3 dates. So two questions you should ask yourself, which is, am I curious to know more about them? And did I like the version of myself that came out when I was around them?
mm,
So if you like the answer to those two questions, no matter if there's chemistry there or not, you are to give this person 3 dates as long as you like the answer to those two questions. The 5 stands for people are so stuck on vanity metrics sometimes where they must be this, they must have this education, they must be this tall, they must be this, they must be that. Scratch that and write down what your 5 core values are. And if you don't know your core values, there's a test that's out there that you can take. It's completely for free. It's super simple. Your 5 values. So let's just say one of your 5 values is financial security, right? Financial security is super important. So you're going to look for and date for somebody who also shows that they also have financial security. Like financial security is something that's important to them. Another value could be family. Another value could be religion. Another value could be peace, right? So if you're somebody who one of your core values is peace and you meet them and they dive in talking about their ex and all the drama and everything that's happening in their life, and you're just like, whoa, I value peace and this is not peaceful to me. So
right.
it's going to be a no, not how tall is he and what does he do for a living? None of that. Because in my experience, the packaging that you think it's in, you're wrong.
Mm,
It comes in so many different packages, the things that you're looking for. And so when you focus on those 5 core values, whatever those are for you, you like the answer to those 2 questions and you give that person 3 dates. And then after the 3 dates, if the chemistry isn't there or whatever, then yeah, you can just bless and release and move on. Because sometimes it just isn't there. And
yeah.
that's okay. And that's okay. But at least give it 3 dates to see, because there is what they call the mere exposure effect. And the mere exposure effect is the longer that we're around something, the more attractive it becomes. And
Mhm.
so sometimes if you just really like how you feel around them and you're super curious about them, that usually after the 3rd date, you can see something in them where you're like, yeah, I could see myself going on a 4th date. So that's kind of the things that you should be paying attention to and not the spark, because the spark is usually a representation of something that could be from your past. It could be an attraction in which that probably could is not a good attraction for you.
Yeah, I've heard that, like your wounds, right? The past wounding. This has been amazing. Is there any last thing you want to share?
Oh my gosh. I think that one of the things with all of the interviews that I do with singles, with matchmaking and even with clients, I think the one thing that I always tell them is that know that it's there for them, but you have to believe it in order to receive it. So you have to be hopeful that love exists for you and that it's there for you. And it is there for you. It's just you have to believe it in order to recognize it and to let it in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I went on a date with someone who didn't believe it. That was not a fun date.
No, gosh, no.
I'm like, why are
Oh
you
no.
even dating?
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing here? Yeah.
Yes, amazing. So thank you so much, Kat. Where
Yeah,
can
thank
people
you.
find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is theheartagency.com. They can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Cat Cantrill, and then my podcast, Dear Matchmaker, where they can hear our interview.
Yes, awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thanks again. And thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you right here. Well, I'll see you right here next week.
thank you.
You're welcome.